Write a vomit pass first, rewrite it hard, procrastinate a little, and then never show your script any mercy. At least that's the code that I live by. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, we have a heck of an episode today. I know there's other codes to live by. I've heard about the karate, but we have the masters themselves. We have the co-creators and co-showrunners of Cobra Kai. That's Josh Held, Jon Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg, and they are here with us today to break down episodes 1 through 5 of season 6. That's right. It's part 1 of a 3-part finale to the entire show of Cobra Kai. And I got to say, this episode was just a blast because it was so fun to get in there and look under the hood a little and see what these different elements mean to them that they've been juggling for so long and how they're going to conclude the show. And there's a lot going on in season 6 on Netflix, and I think you're really going to dig it. So the fun thing about all this is if you haven't been watching Cobra Kai or if you're not caught up, you have time to catch up. They've only released the first 5 episodes. The next 5 come out in November 2024, and then the final 5 come out in 2025. So you should be able to get caught up and watch the finale with the rest of the world, no matter where you are in your watch of Cobra Kai, but I hope you're caught up. And look, this was a really fun episode where Jon, Josh, and Hayden really examined their creative process and let us know what it's like to run this great show, so I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig while you're surfing around online, I hope you check out Backstory Magazine. We just turned 12 this summer, and to celebrate, not only did we put out a new issue, that's right, issue 52, but we also just put up our huge Deadpool and Wolverine writer's story for free. Anybody in the world could check it out. It's on our blog. You do not need to be a subscriber, but I wanted to give people a taste of really the great stuff that goes into every article in Backstory Magazine. And this was a fun one because it is a spoiler-specific article in which we were allowed to talk about the spoilers once the embargo lifted. And it really is a fun and detailed look into what made Deadpool and Wolverine the #1 box office film in the world. If you've never read Backstory before, you could find us at backstory.net or on an iPad as the Backstory app, and you'll probably enjoy checking out our free issue. And once you read it, and I hope you do, if you like it, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoomcasts go. It would really mean a lot to me to have you join us and support independent film journalism by becoming a subscriber. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with co-creators and showrunners of Cobra Kai Season 6, Episodes 1 through 5, with Josh Held, Jon Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg. Well, so we're gonna go way back for a second here, just to give our podcast listeners a baseline. I would love to know the lessons of writing Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, going all the way back to the beginning. What were some of the lessons of writing that, which, you know, was pivotal for you guys, that kind of led to influencing your writing habits over the years?
Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Hayden and I we wrote that in our early 20s. When we were early in writing, it was probably, I think, the 4th screenplay that we ever wrote. It started off with writing what you know. I'll say that. It was certainly, we were living a little bit of that Harold and Kumar lifestyle, young professionals in a sense who were, had a work ethic, but also partook in a little bit of weed smoking every once in a while. And, that movie was inspired by living in Los Angeles and wanting a very specific kind of donut. We wanted the Boston cream donut, and we didn't know our way around town, but we recognized different donut shops from when we were driving out to go to meetings. So one night we're like, hey, let's go get a Boston cream donut. So we're like, oh, there's a donut shop over here. We drove to that donut shop. They didn't have it. Oh, that's frustrating. Let's go to another one. And we just kept going. We had that very specific kind of food that we wanted. And we thought that this was just sort of a relatable journey in a sense. Not everyone's been in love, but everyone's been hungry before and craved a specific kind of food. So we took it from there. But, it was, starting with underdogs, we set up Harold and Kumar in those opening pages as, underdogs that you could hopefully root for. We had a Korean American and Indian American characters at the center who were like our best friends. Like, we grew up in New Jersey and went to, colleges where a lot of our friends were guys like Harold and Kumar, who were no different than us. They were Americans who just happened to have a different cultural background. So we put those characters at the center and took them on a journey of insanity and comedy. But at the core, we kept Harold and Kumar relatable and grounded themselves. It was just the world around them that was a bit nuts.
When did you guys link up with Josh?
Jon and I met in high school, and we started, writing while we were in college. We went to separate colleges. I went to University of Chicago. Jon went to University of Pennsylvania. We would email scripts back and forth. And I visited Jon at University of Pennsylvania our freshman year. And at that point, Jon had met Josh at college there. So I met Josh, that freshman year too, when I visited Jon. So the three of us have known each other since that freshman year of college, basically, since 18 years. We were 18 years old back then. And immediately we all bonded over comedy, but Jon and I we're already kind of talking about writing and doing screenwriting. And so we started writing screenplays, and in college sold a screenplay to MGM. So
sorry to interrupt. What did you sell? And was it ever made? Or I'm guessing
it was never made. MGM bought the script. It was called Outside the Box, but by the time we sold it, it was called Filthy.
Okay. Give us the pitch. Give us the pitch.
The pitch is basically, a slice of what our lives were like at the time. It was two best friends who just graduated college, and one of them has a career trajectory and the other one has no career trajectory. Right. But because they just graduated, there's, this month or two before they're actually going to go off and do their different things. And so they're hanging out that summer and ultimately, decide to go into business together at the end of the story, which is kind of what, Jon and I were, we had our career paths. We were not excited about our career paths, wanted to do something together. And that was, what we were going through. There's nothing about that sounds raunchy or outrageous, right. But the way we wrote back then was incredibly, push the line as much as possible. We were, fans of Howard Stern. We were fans of the edgiest comedy that was coming out in theaters. We loved that Farrelly Brothers shock, gross out kind of comedy. And it was a combination of every type of, but we also loved like witty comedies and dry comedies, and we put every type of comedy into it. And ultimately MGM bought it, but they never made it. There was a director that was put on it. It went through a kind of development hell, but the things that came out of it were, we wrote set pieces. We got into the skill of writing comedy set pieces. And the two main characters in it were based on Jon and me, but we created the friend group around them off of our own friend group. And we had a lot of Asian and Indian friends. And so when you look at that first screenplay, there are characters, Harold and Kumar, in there. It ended up being something where Jon said Harold and Kumar was our fourth script. Our first three all had Harold and Kumar as characters. They were kind of like a Jay and Silent Bob for us, but the scripts never got made. So it was just kind of an inside joke.
Well, and so Josh, when did you start writing with the fellas?
We all started writing together in 2016, 2017 when we decided to make Cobra Kai together. I moved out to Los Angeles in 2001, about 9 months after these guys, and began my own career pursuit, and ended up without a writing partner, doing, essentially the same thing, writing R-rated comedy, pushing the envelope, creating the Hot Tub Time Machine universe. But, we always read each other's stuff, had the same inside jokes, felt like we were all writing within the same shared universe of, understanding what we wanted R-rated comedy to be, and really enjoyed that. And then, kind of decided to put the supergroup together at some point. And I feel like it was mid to late 2016, we all were coming up for air from various projects and said, this thing we've been talking about is years as a movie. What if we switched gears and thought of it as a long form series? And it just kind of felt right to us. We all started seeing moments and episodes and pairings, and, the Matrix started coming together, and thus was born Counterbalance.
We'll get to that in 1 second, but just before we do, every writer has a favorite script that's never been made. It's either trapped in development or it's still on their shelf. Do you guys have like a one that got away? Are there any scripts that to this day you still hope might get made that you want to get another crack at?
There are scripts that maybe like we need to, the concept, we still want to get made, but sometimes you look back on it and it's 15 years old and it would need a total rethinking. One of the first scripts that Josh and I all collaborated on, Josh was the writer on it, but it was John and I had this idea also. So we had like a story by credit, was this movie All You Can Eat at New Line Cinema. It was like the Karate Kid, but in the world of competitive eating. Like there was a character, I think it was like Daniel Caruso or something like that, as a main character, and you had the kind of antagonists in the competitive eating world.
Are we talking like hot dog contests here? Is that what we're talking about?
Hot dog contests definitely, but there's a whole circuit out there that gets deeper into it. And while we were working on that script, Josh actually entered into some official competitive eating competitions, had competed against Joey Chestnut, and did respectable work, much to his dismay. But Josh, do you have anything to share with that?
I ate a lot of hot dogs. Yeah, we developed that for a couple of years with two different studios. We had two different directors attached at one point. It's the project that felt like it was going to come together at various times, and it was so much fun just to live in that purely unadulterated broad comedy of and physical comedy of people overeating, having various bodily, movements that happen as a result of that. It was an underdog sports story. We couldn't help it. We were writing Karate Kid, but instead of karate, it had, vats of mayonnaise.
I hope you dust it off. I hope it gets a second chance.
We have talked about it recently, but that's like the one that comes to mind.
Well, let's get into Cobra Kai. I mean, like after you guys did it, everybody's like smacking their heads. Like, of course, like how could we not see this? Like in real life, the characters have aged and they deserve a second act, so why not? When you were sitting down to do it, was one of the first things you did check on the rights to see if you could get the IP locked up before you went out and pitched? Tell us how that worked.
That was the first thing up. I mean, it was interesting because to us, Karate Kid is basically as big as Star Wars. Like it people of our generation, as many people knew Karate Kid in our minds, and it was equally beloved. So it was kind of crazy to us that there wasn't any, movement on going back to Johnny and Daniel's stories. And I mean, it was even in the early 2000s, we started talking about this idea as a movie. We're like, what happened to the bully from your high school, but tell the story through Johnny Lawrence?
Yeah,
was sort of what the first From was. But when it was like 2016 and we're like, let's turn this into a series, we basically developed enough of the idea for the show so that when we would have the right meetings, we weren't just going in there being like, hey, can we have the rights to Karate Kid? We wanted to go in with a good take on what we were doing here. At the time, we called our agent, Joe Cohen at CAA, and he told us that, Will Smith's company was kind of controlling the rights of Karate Kid at the time because they had made the movie with Jaden,
right,
and that there was some semi-active development with the sequel at the time. So we had to kind of go through their company, and we had a meeting with Caleb Pinkett, who was working over there at Overbrook. And we didn't know what to expect going into that meeting. And we pitched passionately for a half hour as Caleb is sort of there, sort of nodding and listening along. And I'll never forget, like, as soon as we were done, he just, I don't know if he has like just a photographic memory or anything, but like he remembered every detail of our pitch and was coming back to us. He's roughly our age, had the same, movie references in his life, loves all the same stuff that we did. He was like, I love this about it. I love this about it. I love this about it. And he just like was so excited. And what we pitched to him was basically the show that everyone's seen, a lot of season 1. And he's like, I'm going to make sure this happens. So he went to, the people at his company and they were all on board. So from there, it was like, okay, Overbrook's on board. Now we got to pitch Sony. So then we pitched it over at Sony, convinced them that this was a great idea. They were a little bit less knowledgeable about the Karate Kid than, say, Caleb was. And they may have asked at one point, like, so who's playing the guys? And we're like, it's Johnny and it's Ralph
Right.
and Billy. That's what we've been saying. Once they kind of got on board, we all banded together and they're like, okay, well, if you could get Ralph and Billy, go get them. And that was the next step for us.
Something really important here that I think a lot of writers would appreciate hearing from your perspective is this is your first TV show. You're jumping into the fire with film experience, but you're going to become showrunners. You're running a writer's room. You're responsible for a seasonal character arc. What are some of the lessons that you gleaned in Trial by Fire on that season one and how it's kind of informed you as you've grown? Honest to God, I've loved it since season one. We've been proud to have you guys in Backstory Magazine before talking about it, but like each season you've grown incrementally and it's better than the last season. So what are some of the things that you remember when, the light bulb pops off above your head as you're kind of learning to be a showrunner? No pressure on Josh. We'll start with Josh.
I think we just took everything we had learned being on feature sets and applied that to television, and then learned where that didn't apply. That first season, we were so used to having that muscle of having your full script of everything you're about to shoot completely buttoned up and ready to go. And yeah, rewrites happen while you're in production, but you really know your beginning, middle, and end. And it was very important to us that when we hit production of season one, even though we didn't have all 10 scripts yet, we really knew what that beginning, middle, and end was. And we, jumped into a writer's room for the first time, as showrunners and as, people steering that conversation. We had all been in various roundtable, rooms before where you're with a bunch of screenwriters punching up a script or, doing surgery. We had all, run those types of conversations before for our own projects and others. And we had all taken on rewrites of other people's, projects. So, discussing story was not something that was foreign to us. Doing it, every day, 8 hours a day was something that was a rhythm that we had to get into and start to, respect the way that has been done for people who have been in those types of rooms before, and also bring our own energy to it and not be afraid of our own instincts when it comes to story. We're people who want to zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in as we discuss story development. Sometimes it's very nitty gritty to a given, character moment in a season or in an episode. And sometimes it's global for what is the feeling we want, the audience to come away with at the end of episode 5. So, we really just brought our instincts to it. And then once we got onto set, it was not that dissimilar from, directing a movie or, even being, a writer on set on a movie where you're making, a lot of decisions. You're having a clear point of view. And, regardless if we were directing or not, it became clear that we were certainly filling that role that a feature director has on set. That's, what the showrunner is there for, to be making those decisions, steering the ship, guiding, any given guest director to land your vision. Thankfully we had a decade and a half of experience before that to bring to the table. So it was fairly seamless.
John.
No, it's interesting. I was going to say that, because Hayden and I had directed a couple movies that we had written before, and immediately it felt like the showrunner job was very similar to being a writer-director. It's, you're not only generating the story, but you're also hiring all the department heads and being able to articulate a vision to a wide array of people, from executives to every single creative department, which is exactly what you do when you're a writer-director of a film. So it was a really natural progression. The biggest thing that was it's not exactly growing pains. It was just sort of like the new resource of having the amount of writers that we had was exciting. And that was the thing that was new for us, because, we jumped into that first writer's room. We had written 3 scripts before we got into the writer's room, because we're like, okay, no one's going to know what this is. No one's going to understand the tone of what this is. So let's really write a few episodes ourselves, so that once we're there with the writers, they will have something that they could read and understand the show, because it's so specific and so different than anything else that was out there. I think that, in talking about growing pains, we didn't know the difference of the different titles in a writer's room or what they were. For us, and this has been our philosophy just in general in filmmaking, the best idea comes from anyone. We don't care if your title is executive producer, co-EP, or, story editor, or or you're a staff writer. And I think in that first room, we were just listening to ideas from anyone, and maybe there was probably some politics within the room going on in terms of like, people are like, well, I'm the senior guy, why is this staff writer talking so much?
Right.
But like, we just viewed it as a bunch of talented people that we hired, who we liked all of their, the scripts that we read of theirs and got good recommendations, and they were all just, in our minds, equals in the room contributing. So it was sort of like learning the strengths of the writers, like seeing, I think in the early seasons of the show, especially season 1, we rewrote almost every word of every script. Not entirely, but like there was so much that we did rewriting because we were so used to being the people who wrote every word of our features, and people were still learning exactly what we were trying to do. As the seasons have gone on, people were like able to see the finished product of the show. So we have a number of writers that have come back and have been on the show for many years, who now, by seasons 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they can write a script and it feels 100% like a script of the show. And, maybe we're digging in there, here or there with certain things. The other thing I would just add is like season 1, we were really driving most of the story and every single element of it. We had so much figured out. And now it's become more of a collaboration with like a group of trusted writers and some new voices that are all in there creating the stories. And there's so much, as we get into the later and later seasons, that got generated from the talented writers in our room who know and love the characters just as much as we do and have, brilliant, awesome ideas. So we enter a season every season where the three of us talk beforehand. This is what the season's going to be. Here's the general shape of it. Here's the story arcs that we're talking about. But let's open up for discussion and see, are these the best ideas? And we challenge the ideas and we take it from there. And episode by episode, it's equally the writers' rooms as it is ours.
Hayden, light bulb idea moments for you. And also, were you guys big outliners? Because I know TV, has a necessity for outlining your season. But Hayden, go for it.
Absolutely. We were big outliners as feature writers. So I think, I just continuing what Josh said, bringing the beginning, middle, end kind of storytelling to series format, which we weren't the first to do. I mean, we saw it with, Oz and Sopranos and all these things. Like those were the types of shows that we liked. They were more, they felt more like a movie. And so that was our mentality going into it. I think the light bulb moment for us was realizing that, when you say beginning, middle, and end, well, the middle also has to be the end of the first part. And then, the end of the first episode needs its own beginning, middle, and end. And the zoom in, zoom out quality that Josh just referred to earlier is the key in figuring where you're at with your story. So we go into that first season and we know what the story, we know how Johnny is, how we're going to introduce Johnny, and we know the journey we want to take him through. And we realized that midpoint was, Miguel going from the kid who's getting picked on to suddenly he beats up the bully. So he goes through the Karate Kid journey in the first half.
Yeah.
So you're not feeling like this when you watch a season of Cobra Kai. It's not one of those things where you got to watch 3 or 4 episodes and then you get sort of hooked in. It's like, no, because we have a shorter story, you're following this thing that's building and crescendoing to episode 5, and then you continue on from there. That's the key to us, and we've done, every season approached it that way. That's why we felt going into season 6 that we could release it in 3 5-part episodes, because we're used to building up towards an episode 5. I think that's the key for us, is viewing the whole season in like parts and 2 halves, and thinking of the beginning, middle, and end of part 1, the beginning, middle, and end of part 2, but it all should be a beginning, middle, and end for Johnny and Daniel, the whole story and what's that season about.
Well, and season 5 split up into 3 parts of 5 episodes also has 3 acts to its own season as well that you're basically creating. So that makes sense too. One of the things that you're all really talented with is ensemble writing. What do you think that some of the keys are to ensemble writing? Is it making sure after you figured out the story of 2 people, say Johnny and Daniel, that you're then doing a pass to figure out the side characters? Because you're very good at making sure that your characters are serviced and sometimes even missing, so that you could spend more time on other characters. So there will be an episode where we really don't see everybody, and that doesn't hurt anything at all. But what are some of the tips and tricks you've learned over the course of this? And this will be our last non-spoiler question for ensemble writing.
I think it just stems from, our whole careers. We love side characters. We've loved watching them in movies. We've, loved writing them. You have a freer hand sometimes because their introduction is not saddled with emotional story development. You can bring in a character as a joke. You can bring in somebody who's there to literally just, introduce conflict for somebody else. It's usually the arrival of a side character is not always announcing themselves. It's more, how do they affect somebody we're already on a journey with? And in television, you have the ability with the runway in front of you to then turn the camera on that side character, and they're not a side character anymore. They're front and center as their own character that you care about. It's everybody on Cobra Kai except for Johnny and Daniel, what was a side character when we started the series. And, when you bring in, Miguel and Eli and Dimitri and Sam and Yasmin and Moon and, all these characters that you're, loading up in the first few episodes, they're all tangential to the reason that you showed up. If you're a fan of 1984's The Karate Kid, and then suddenly you start realizing, oh, I'm kind of enjoying that character, and we kind of enjoy those characters. So we intentionally try to bring in a character that has a real third dimension, even if you're not leading with that third dimension in their first appearance, which is okay. Their first appearance can be a very two-dimensional appearance, as long as we know what that third dimension is, and we know, when we might or how we might activate that third dimension. It's kind of like having a superpower, because all of a sudden you find yourself emotionally caring about a character that you've only laughed at, or laughing at a character that you've only had, conflict and turmoil with. And we just try to make sure we know who these people are before they, walk on stage, so we can talk about it in the writer's room. We can speak about it with the actor and say, hey, you might not be playing this for 5 episodes or even at all this season, but this is kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And
it's good to know for motivations. That makes sense.
It lets them bring something, and it lets us have someplace to go.
John.
Headspace has been everything for us our entire careers in terms of characters. It's understanding what a character is thinking in every scene, and that's the characters that are speaking, or even a character who comes in with one line, here and there. So, we're always tracking the characters. And what we love about making television versus a feature, and we love making features too, is just the real estate. To have 5 hours, in a season of Cobra Kai to tell story, it allows you to focus on the side characters. Like, I think Josh was saying, like, we all grew up loving side characters in movies and entertainment. And in our feature careers, we always try to make every character distinct and specific and really understand their point of view. From a experience standpoint, when Hayden and I made the movie American Reunion, which is the American Pie reunion movie, and I remember the challenge of that movie was, it was already an ensemble cast, and you had you're doing a 90 to 100-minute movie, which is a reunion where you're supposed to follow all these characters, and there's a lot of scenes with a lot of the characters all in the same scene. Yeah. So that gave us, I think, our first experience of really having 8 to 10 characters deep that you're really thinking about every single scene. And I remember one of the things when we're directing the American Reunion was, you're on set and, in the scene, because you only had 110 pages to write, you would be focusing on Jim and Stifler as the main characters of a scene or whatever it is, but you'd have 6 people in the scene. And sometimes you'd be like, wait a second, Oz doesn't have a line, or, one of the other characters doesn't have a line. And we're going to be on set with these actual real life flesh and blood actors tomorrow, and they're not going to want to be sitting around in a scene. So it made you think about sort of every single character, what they're thinking. And we would always, the day before, add extra lines for every character. So we'd have our approved script that was a certain number of pages, and the real script was actually probably instead of 110 pages, it was 150 pages, because you're actually
right.
Giving everybody something, so that when they're on set, you have a bunch of happy, engaged actors who are all focused on things. Moving this to Cobra Kai, when you have this ensemble cast, it allows us, because it's 5 hours, to, like you said, spend a little time on some characters, let characters disappear for a while. I remember when we made season 2 of Cobra Kai, we didn't bring back certain characters that we knew we were going to bring back in a later season. And we've done that kind of thing on and off throughout the series, where sometimes you could have a character leave in a big, impactful way, and then you find the right moment to bring them back into the story that's going to be impactful. It's always about thinking about, like, the point of view of the characters, what characters have juice with one another, where there's actual rooting interest, actual things that matter, what are fun new pairings that can happen, so it's just utilizing the real estate in fun and interesting different kinds of ways.
Hayden.
As they were talking, I was thinking about the show Oz, which was a show that John, Josh, and I watched and were very influenced by. And that was a show that was a giant ensemble. And every season, not only was it an ensemble, every season they would add, new characters. There'd be new inmates in this jail. I think what I remember from that show, and I think what we do on Cobra Kai, is we feel like you need new characters to enter into a story to keep things fresh, but they have to enter into the story in a way that affect the characters that you're already caring about. So you start with a certain portion of characters that you're caring about. You introduce these other characters that affect their lives, and then over time in a series, you could start to care about those characters, and you're kind of the tree starts to branch out in different ways. So a character like Tori, for example, we didn't introduce her into the story and say, oh, we start to care about her. You didn't care about her. You cared about Sam and how Tori was affecting Sam's life. And, but now over the course of 6 seasons, you get to it to the point where by episode 5 of season 6, Tori's the one you care the most about in a way. So
absolutely. We'll talk about that in a second for sure. So you're totally right. Cause I mean, it's a great moment and it's impossible to keep doing this without talking spoilers. So podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where these Zoomcasts go. If you have not yet seen Cobra Kai Season 6, Episodes 1 through 5, which is the first batch of this 15-episode finale, press pause because we are going to get into the spoilers right now. Go watch it on Netflix and come back. You have been forewarned. I would be remiss if I started this spoiler section without talking about how season 5 ends. The fight at Silver's house was quite extraordinary, and you were pulling out all the stops. I'm just curious, was there something too crazy to have captured based on your budget or time or safety for your actors? I'm curious if there were any discarded ideas for that, because, I mean, if the house had burned down, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, it was absolutely insane, that finale.
I think in the earliest days of, we're thinking about the end of season 5 and we're probably writing season 4 at the time, there was a version of that fight that took place like on the top of Mulholland Drive on a cliffside, where you see, these two warriors with weapons, fighting on a cliff, almost like Highlander. And then as the season went on, it made sense that there's a house and that.
Well, I think even then, like our hope was that Terry Silver's house would be on the top of Mulholland, like overlooking the valley. Right. So it felt like the fight was for the valley, and because there's these awesome houses up there where you see the valley out in the distance. And it's just frustrating that we can't do everything that we want to do.
We don't shoot the show in Los Angeles. Right. So that's a big deal. So, we occasionally do shoot scenes in Los Angeles and we really make them count. But for something as stunt heavy as the finale, that would have been, multiple days and nights shooting in Los Angeles, which just we don't have the budget for. But thankfully we found that amazing house in Atlanta that the owner had painstakingly built with tons of Asian influences and had perfect settings for it. So everything you see at Terry Silver's house is an actual house. We didn't build anything there. We brought in things to destroy, but we were able to use this, amazing location to bring that to life.
It was awesome. I mean, these are paired because you clearly knew where you were going with Saikai Taikai, because you're setting up which team and who's going to get to go by the end of that season, along with the stuff with Silver. And then it's really dominating for this season, them actually going. How aware of season 6 things were you as you were crafting the end of season 5? Like, how paired were they? Had you graphed out what you were going to do in season 6 already?
We were pretty aware. I mean, we knew that season 6, we wanted to do this world tournament. We'd been talking for a number of years about doing a world tournament. And so, we had an All Valley in season 1. We did an All Valley in season 4. And we're like, okay, the next time we do a tournament, we want it to be this world tournament. So season 5, we wanted to set up the concept of that world tournament. And that was really, the start of it. We knew that we were going to end season 5 where Cobra Kai is taken out in the valley. We knew that we were going to, enter season 6 with our United Dojo. We didn't know, entering the writer's room, we didn't know exactly, what we were going to call the dojo, all those things. These were things that the three of us discussed, and we settled on some things. And then we came into the writer's room with the game plan of sort of like, okay, Johnny's going to end up joining Miyagi-Do, but there will be still the influence of his dojo there. We knew that we were going to have Kreese connect with Kim Dae-yoon, who he had a long history with, hence us in flashbacks in the past, creating that relationship between the two of them when we were introducing that character. And we knew that there would be a, Korean version of Cobra Kai. But we didn't know, a lot of specifics, but it was really just in general, okay, let's set up this Saikai Taikai. Let's set up this idea of a world tournament so that by the time we get to season 6, people know about this thing. It feels like it's part of the history of the show. And you're not having to start in season 6 and then introduce a whole new thing.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine. We just turned 12 this summer. And to celebrate, not only did we put out a new issue, I just put up the Deadpool and Wolverine writer's story for free to the world to read on our blog at backstory.net. I thought it was a fun way to really show people the love and care that we put into every article at Backstory Magazine. And it's a fun piece that really digs into the details because it is spoiler specific. And we were able to examine what went into making Deadpool and Wolverine the #1 box office movie in the world and the most successful R-rated movie of all time. So make sure to check that out at our blog at backstory.net. If you've never read us before, you could read us at backstory.net or on our iPad app Backstory. And there's a free issue waiting right there for you. And if you like what you see, and I hope that you do, I hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber. And to sweeten the deal, I am giving you discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. Look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoomcasts go, so you could see all these discussions on YouTube. It would really mean a lot to me to have you consider supporting independent film journalism and becoming a Backstory subscriber. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with co-creators and showrunners Josh Hield, Jon Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg about Cobra Kai Season 6, Episodes 1 through 5, which is part 1 of the 3-part finale. It's always fun to hear left turns, things that you had on the drafting board for maybe a minute, a day, a week. What was something that you had as an idea for Season 6 that you completely discarded, but could have been cool?
I mean, there's certain things that it's hard to talk about right now because we have, the 10 episodes still haven't aired with it.
I'm talking totally discarded. Like you did not go down that path.
We went down every path we wanted to go down. I mean, some paths, there are complications with certain paths that, are unforeseeable that, you can't get around. It doesn't mean the whole path is closed. It means, you carve a new road out of the same path. I will say we had a really ambitious plan for season 6, and we are going to deliver upon that. We were pretty unapologetic in our end game plan for how this series winds down. And, it's not a spoiler to say that it really amps up before it's over. And because of that, we needed a lot of yeses, a lot of help from production, and a lot of collaboration from everyone at, both the studio and the network. So I can't say we really kind of said, you know what, I think we're going to do this. Then we threw it away. But by the time we got to season 6, so many balls were in the air with various characters that, we knew the storylines we had to lean into. And then there was everything on our list, that we had since the beginning of the series in terms of things we want to achieve in this, series, some of which have gotten pushed to other seasons. And then there was the day one plan for how is this series going to end. And there was no compromise on the big ticket items.
One of the things that you did that I thought was really smart was it's always, a competition, it's easy to decode, right? Because yeah, it's competitive sports, people want to win, but it's the personal aspect that you bake into it that really keeps the audience invested. And so for this group, Miguel wants to go, to Stanford, but thinks that maybe appearing as a captain is going to help him because he's been deferred. You have Robbie and Tori not considering college as a viable option. So they consider this as a possible career path or endorsements and see where karate takes them. Sam wants closure, just one way or another. So that works. And then you have the kind of burgeoning battle between Dimitri and Hawk on the side going on. They're not as comfortable as they once were. You have Kenny thinking that Anthony has given him these laxatives that blew his chance when it was really Devin. So you baked a lot in, and I think it's really important to give people motivations beyond just a trophy for the fight. So what were the challenges there of kind of working out those intricate relationships that I'm sure will continue to change, and even by the end of those first 5 episodes did change?
Well, I mean, you have to put all the characters on a board and think about what their stories are and why this tournament matters to them and what the outcome is. And you want there on the macro level to be some surprises. You don't want to piss off the audience too much. And you just want to be true to the journeys, that they've been on. And I think it's just the painstaking process of going character by character and thinking like, okay, well, what is their story in this? And how does it relate to the Sekai Taikai? That way you're really invested in it. When you get there, you're going to be invested for the whole team. And on an individual level, you're going to be conflicted when not everyone can share, the glory, and it's going to come down to one person. We love those moments where you don't quite know who to root for, and you're kind of nervous. You want everyone to be happy, but right. You understand there needs to be a fight. We treated the first 5 episodes as the preseason. They're all coming together. It's all fun and games. They're practicing, but then at the end of the day, there's a roster, and people will be cut, and people will need to make the team, and who is the captain, and then heading into that the first game as a unit. And we love the idea of ending episode 5 where, okay, we have our team, but you could see all the fractures that are there. Like, they're going to need to solidify as they take on what we've seen is like the White Walkers of karate.
Right. That's a good analogy. I mean, look, Kreese has been a force of nature throughout the show all along. I mean, after the finale for those first 3, I was just curious what our extradition policies are with Barcelona. I mean, can we get Kreese back behind bars? But in all seriousness, in the episode The Prize, you took a really interesting examination of his inner demons and, literally have him battling a cobra. Talk about that, because I thought it was a really interesting, I guess, side journey, you could call it, but that loops back in very easily to the main journey. So what were some of the goals there?
We love writing for Kreese. The show's called Cobra Kai, and he was, the founder of Cobra Kai in the Valley. So it's been fun over the course of the seasons to introduce his war stories in a more in-depth way, and his history with Terry Silver in a clearer way. Like, all of those things are things that we've been building over the course of seasons. We talked about Kim Sun-young, who was like his master, and we learned about him from, way back when in Karate Kid 3. Terry Silver mentions him to Daniel and Mr. Miyagi, and it was just a throwaway that we just all thought was probably just bullshit. Right. And at the end of the day, we made him a real guy. We introduced him through Captain Turner, who was Kreese's captain at war. So we knew that we were building towards this dojo that Kreese had trained at. And entering this season, we had seen, Kim Sun-young in flashbacks when Kreese was younger, but we thought it would be interesting if this, roughly 100-year-old man was still alive today, and while maybe a little bit more frail than he was in the past, is still formidable and a force, and was Kreese's sensei. So at this time when Kreese has escaped from prison, he was locked up as a result of Terry Silver turning on him. He had Johnny and Daniel basically, give him the middle finger in jail and tell him to rot there. And now he's like on the other side of it. he's more determined than ever to kind of get back at these guys and, win on the world stage. His sensei, we like the idea of him being a student again. His sensei basically reminding him, like, you failed in life. You failed in the past. You failed in the way of the fist because you've had these, weaknesses that are there. You haven't embraced no mercy in the way that you need to. So to make Kreese a student again and send him, off to retrieve this knife from this cave, was something that we thought was an interesting journey. And having him sort of battle a cobra, get bit by this cobra and have this hallucination. We always like these kinds of scenes with Kreese where we're inside his head, and
and it's funny. It's funny to see like Master Kim occasionally just belt him with his stick, and Kreese doesn't respond. Because usually that would cause a fight. But
this is his. Yeah, it's his sensei. But this is it's the guy that he respects more than anyone in the world.
That's right. And during the hallucinations, though, it's interesting because you see into his mind, and you see a little bit of guilt of not doing what he wanted to do for Johnny. Like, it was interesting how Johnny was coming up into his fever dream, and essentially he was discarding his fever dreams almost sociopathically, saying, I don't care about anybody anymore. Like forget Johnny, who cares? Like, I'm just going to go do my own thing as Cobra Kai guy. It was kind of an interesting resolution to how those fever dreams ended. Do you have anything to comment on that? Because it's kind of like a sociopathic glimpse into his mind, but also a turning point where he doesn't really seem to care about anybody.
Well, Kreese has always been, the most dangerous person in the Cobra Kai universe. Hayden might argue, Terry Silver, had that mantle at a period of time, but Kreese always had a soft spot for Johnny, even in, in the season 2 finale, when he's taking Cobra Kai away from Johnny. It's done in a way that he thinks is tough love. And, he's telling him, one day you'll thank me for this. He really thinks he knows the way, and that Johnny knew that way at one point and lost his way. And all the way up through the season 5 moment when Johnny and Daniel come to Kreese in prison and, are trying to get him to do the right thing. Kreese is still trying to extend some sort of partnership to Johnny and show Johnny, come on, what are you doing with this guy? Like, you're a Cobra Kai like me. So it was always the thing that humanized Kreese, and that showed us that, even though he's dangerous, he's a weapon that, is wielded in the right direction. Going into that cave and, confronting all of his, inner demons and his psyche, and coming face to face with Johnny again, that thing that Silver has told us, is his weakness, and saying, you know what, I have to kill that weakness to move forward. And if that's what I need to do, then that's what I need to do, because it's a different world now, because Johnny has told Kreese, forget you. And, for lack of a better, raunchier explanation, but that's a moment that was important to us to see that, this is a Kreese who is not unhinged, but is unencumbered by his vulnerability for Johnny. And that's going to be a re-upping of his danger.
Yeah. And I mean, look, the first episode's called Peace in the Valley. It was great to see there had been alliances between Johnny and Daniel all along in previous seasons. But I think Peace in the Valley and having Johnny literally join Miyagi-Do and basically work at LaRusso Auto Group, there was a lot going on there. And I thought it was really interesting. But then in the finale of those first 5, there's a rift between them about how to handle Tori. And we'll talk about her in a second, but I thought it was really an interesting place to leave them, in which you did something that you've done very well, in which Johnny, although he might have been the bully in the past, he's grown a lot as a character. And he's not wrong in saying that she was trying to work out her demons of her mother dying on the mat against Sam, and that she needed that space to do it. But at the same time, Daniel's right that, she was maybe going to put Sam in the hospital, because Tori was so overcome with emotion in that scene. And so they kind of leave it as they're just going to get through this, kind of co-parent the kids, and then split up, basically the way that you left it. Tell us about getting those two to that point, because that was a very interesting arc for those first 5 episodes.
I think it all stems from their philosophies, and the Miyagi-Do approach to life is to let go of your emotion. And the Cobra Kai, philosophy is to take that emotion and, be bold with it. That's one of the things that we've loved about the show is not just giving, antagonists their own backstories that you could sympathize with, but taking aggressiveness itself and some of these like offensive philosophies and, creating scenarios where, which approach is the right one. We grew up with, Mr. Miyagi as the way. And we know that the Cobra Kai way is bad as it was presented in the movies. And we tried to kind of always find the flip side of that, where, sometimes you have to think offensively and you have to be aggressive. And it is good to live with your emotions. It's Spock versus Captain Kirk. So Johnny has this, whether he's right or wrong, or whether you agree or disagree, he has a worldview that for him, it's like you get angry, you need something to smash into, you need that pillow to smash into. That's how he gets through that. That's how he becomes a better person. Whereas Daniel, feels like, you have to kind of let things go and try to be at peace inside. And, we always have it where the Cobra Kai instructors like, take your aggression and like throw it into your punch. And so you just see it right there. And, we try as much as possible to make all their arguments feel fresh. We understand that audiences want them to be happy and be friends, and they have been. So there's a little bit of like frustration when they slide back into an argument. The reasoning behind that is they're two totally different types of people that are going to butt heads. And that's ideally where the comedy comes from and the conflict. The key is just it not being something that feels unrealistic. Like, okay, they wouldn't get into this kind of argument after being friends. Well, no, they have never been in this situation before. And we actually highlight that they've learned from their mistakes. They're not going to split up. They're going to try to continue to make this work, but it's like, it's more for the kids.
It was very organic because, I mean, they're just trying to find their way as senseis, and they're faced with a very emotionally charged situation, and neither one of them were wrong on their approach. They didn't know what to do. They were getting their way through it. Look, full disclosure, I'm a Gen Xer. I saw Karate Kid in theaters, as a youngster, and I ended up taking karate. And like the first thing our sensei said was like, if any of you go out and do something bad like Cobra Kai and beat up another kid, I will come find you and beat you up. Like you can't use karate for bad. It was a very kind of Jedi thing. So it was an interesting thing to see them learning to kind of become senseis on their own. That would bring us, of course, to Tori's narrative. You've had this class struggle thing baked in where she's from very low economic means, and she's watching the kids around her live a different life. And, she's also a caregiver for her mom, and her mom dies. And it really sets her down a path and makes those kind of insidious words that Kreese told her that they're never going to let you do your own thing at Miyagi-Do. Like it's always going to, give favoritism to LaRusso's kids. And really the final way that they were refereeing that match, it would have been fair because Johnny was reffing the girls, not Daniel. So, I mean, she was influenced that way, but tell us about that track of like having her have her mother pass away and then just flipping out and just going against everything to go back to Cobra Kai, which is a big move for her because she really renounced them.
Yeah, it's something we planned, very painstakingly in the writer's room. It was, this season you're going to see, start off with Sam and Tori are finally in the same dojo together. And first of all, it's like they need to like get over their past a little bit with one another. And we wanted to build them to a place where the two of them were friends by, the middle of these first 5, so that we're feeling like, okay, it's a different place. We knew that we were going to, have Tori's mother pass away. We knew going into the writing of the season that we were going to want Tori to be on the Cobra Kai side in there. And it had to be building it in a way that made sense. And for us, we thought that the combination of Kreese, who, despite his flaws, actually there's been a purity in his relationship with Tori over the years. Even last season when she was acting as a mole for him, as soon as things started to get a little bit dangerous and he realized that he was going to try to escape himself, he distanced himself from her so that she was not involved with it. he actually has had only like the best of intentions when it came to Tori with what was going on there. So when he came to her, he's throwing things in her head that he believes. Now, we are seeing on the other side that he's wrong about these things, but we constructed a set of circumstances that would make it where she would feel like he was right. On top of that, we built the relationship that she had with her mother in a way where she felt like her fulfilling her like karate dreams would be honoring her mother in the right possible way. That she's not just doing this because she wants to win a karate tournament, but it's also she's doing this for her mom, and she can't let her mom down in her mind. So there was a lot of emotion going into sort of where she was there. And yeah, when writing the final scenes of that episode, we had long discussions in the writer's room of like what everyone's point of view was, where their headspaces were, what feels believable for each person in that
suspension of disbelief is really important there for her to actually leave all of her friends. So that is interesting.
Yeah, so you had to build it to a place where it's believable, and we see the audience reacting strongly, which is great. Like there are people who are like, "How could she do that? Now she's a villain again." It's like,
right.
Well, we're viewing her as like it's a logical place for a girl who's emotionally distraught, who's had the kind of tough life that she's had, that has the Kreese influence, and is desperate to honor her mother's, passing by fulfilling her destiny. We think that she might do whatever it takes. And, either she made the right decision or the wrong decision to go back to Cobra Kai, and we'll find out.
I mean, like you've shined the light in every possible corner of the franchise, ranging from Chosen to Silver to Kreese's past to Cobra Kai's past to obviously Master Kim. But really, I love the finale moment of Kreese and her showing up. But really, the concept that you are now going to expand Mr. Miyagi's backstory, I thought was fantastic. So tell us how the idea of the box came about. And then this great link to the realization of the bloody headband in the box has the Saikai Taikai tournamentship logo on it, because, I think that's something that fans are really going to enjoy as we get into the upcoming episodes in November and beyond, when we get to learn more about Mr. Miyagi's past, because I could see that dangling there for you for a long time of when do we expand Miyagi's storyline and how. So when did that come about as to how you utilized it here?
We've been thinking about Mr. Miyagi for a long time, since we were kids. Through this project, we've been fortunate enough to get to know Robert Mark Kamen, who created Mr. Miyagi, and we've become, very good friends with him. And we've had a lot of discussions, over the years as we've developed, the franchise and have gone in different directions. And it's important to us, how he feels about, the stories we're telling, sometimes before we tell it, sometimes after. But with Mr. Miyagi, it's hallowed ground. And it's, we've always treated Mr. Miyagi at arm's length. Whatever exists in the franchise is what happened. There are some pieces of connective tissue that we've delved into from time to time, like when someone tells a story about, Mr. Miyagi and the period of time that he was still alive while Daniel was married to Amanda, and Sam remembers him, and Anthony doesn't really. Right. But it was always with the paintbrush of here's the most perfect man who ever lived, who had no flaw, and everything we think about him can be used as a lesson for how to live our lives. And that's just not realistic. There's actually something better, perhaps, about digging into somebody who is, who has that kind of seemingly perfect, live your life according to the way I lived mine and everything will work out reputation, and discovering that maybe not every single piece that adds up to the whole is the best story on its surface. And we wanted to get into that real world idea that you grow up idolizing your parents and grandparents, and you think, oh, they know best because they've kept me alive and they've been fed and housed. And then you might learn something at some point that challenges that about a time when they made a unfortunate decision or, paid the price for something and learned from it. And ultimately you realize that's what made them able to be the person whose opinion I respect, because they've lived a full life, and that full life sometimes comes with ups and downs and regrets. And it felt like time to not undo the good that we know of Mr. Miyagi and the way that we think about him, but to begin to have Daniel look at him as a human being who lived a full life and had aspects to that life that he didn't lead with and didn't share with Daniel, and the frustrations of the person not being there to question and depose and ask about all the details that go into something. So when faced with the idea that, you know, there's this headband and it's related to the Sakai Taikai and it has, you know, blood on it, you know, and the box in general and the rabbit hole that, you know, Daniel starts going down in these first
the
5
newspaper
episodes.
article that Mr. Miyagi had to flee the country and is possibly wanted for murder.
A newspaper, the passport, you know, there's a lot of these, you know, these intentional, you know, branches to this life that are tucked away, that we'll see which ones bear fruit and which don't. And we'll see what the continuation of that storyline is. But the inception of that, we feel, is powerful and is actually doing Mr. Miyagi justice by beginning to, you know, to delve into the full picture of the man rather than just the deity that he exists as lording over this universe.
I guess the question to end on for each of you is, what was your toughest scene out of these 5? What was the scene that you kept coming back to in the writer's room over and over again, curious about how to crack, that kind of kept you up at night, that made you wonder, are we going to get through this? How are we going to do it? Or something that even needed to be rewritten during filming? So the toughest scene, and of course, I don't want to, you know, put any heat on Hayden, but we're going to start with Hayden. Toughest scene for you of these first 5 of your last 15, and then we'll get toughest scene from the other guys as well.
I would just say that final Johnny Daniel fight in episode 5 is something that went through a lot of discussion, you know, back and forth, just because it was something that we knew having Johnny Daniel argue is going to be something that will, you know, could frustrate the audience. But we wanted to make sure that it was, everything felt right there. Everything felt true. Everything that we were talking about before about Johnny's perspective and why he was doing that, and all the words there, you know, making it feel believable that Daniel would punch him, you know, in the moment. Because, you know, the macro story of the 5, you know, I said, you know, we think beginning, middle, and ends, but 5 has to be the end, even though it's actually the 1/3 way part. It's the end of Act 1 for this giant, you know, season. But as an end, it felt like if you're starting with everyone together in episode 1, you're going to want to end with those like fractures happening in 5. And that starts from the top all the way down. But like, you know, with Johnny and Daniel, if they were just really together and bow into each other in a really great way, it's like, then there'd be no journey in the first 5 episodes. And so just making sure that that scene paid off, I think was one that I know like the actors were really into, and we went over a couple different iterations.
Jon?
I'll start with, you know, the first episode was really hard. The first episode of every season is a challenge because you have so many characters and you're like, you know, you want to make like a 35-minute episode and want to make sure that you have full storylines and see most of the characters, but not like it was finding the balance and the recipe of what we were doing in that first episode. And I remember, you know, we had the Kenny, the element of the sort of the hanging chads from season 5, where Kenny was sort of the odd man out. He was part of Cobra Kai. Now he had rejected Silver, but had not come back to the group. So that was something that needed to be repaired. And then there was this element of Sam and Tori and their situation that, like, okay, well, they were on the same side of saving the day, but that doesn't mean that they're friends at this point. So those were 2 sort of kid storylines that were important, but we also had establishing Johnny and what's going on in his mind, and establishing Daniel, what's going on in his mind. And we knew that we wanted to like settle on, by the end of this episode, the dojo name. And you know what's going on there with that, and you know, so there was a lot that we had to achieve, and I think that a breakthrough that happened was us combining the Tori and using the Tori and Sam storyline to be a part of the Kenny storyline.
Interesting.
That basically, initially in our earliest outlines, we had them as 2 siloed off separate things, and the outlines were too long, and it felt like, you know, we weren't getting to the right place. And there was a period of time where we cut one of the storylines, and we're like, but then you wanted to have some resolution by the end of the episode because you wanted by the end of the episode, everyone's sort of now united under Miyagi-Do. So there was a lot of sort of changes there. But I remember the breakthrough, and this was just a storyline breakthrough, was the concept of Miguel and Robbie realizing, yes, their girlfriends are in the same dojo, but they're not united, and coming up with this idea of the double date, and then having them encounter Kenny during the double date, sort of like the Kenny issue be the thing that brings the two girls together, was sort of like a huge breakthrough that we had that took a while to get.
That's fascinating because you took all of your elements, as you said, that were siloed, and you put them together into one scene, which increased the stakes for everybody. So that was a really smart move.
But it was something that I'll say that, before the strike, we were supposed to start shooting right before the strike, and we're still struggling kind of with that around then. And it was like, during the strike, as the three of us talking and realizing, oh, this is the way to kind of do that. But like, it was that was sort of one of the more challenging things.
Josh,
the whole thing's a nightmare to put together. I mean, really, it's John hit upon what I was going to say. It's you have the struggle with an episode called Peacetime in the Valley is it's devoid of an antagonist, so you have to find that internal conflict, and I'm glad that we did. But I mean, the big thing is, we have no filler episodes. Maybe at one point we had, a filler episode or two along the way, but not even really, maybe a filler storyline. But with the real estate we had left, we know everything that we need to set up and some of the things we need to resolve, in those first five. And every single, moment is either is either setting up a storyline that's going to pay off within those first five, or something that's going to explode into the next five. And it was really mapping out all those moments, knowing that you know where you're going to begin and end a series of 5 episodes, but those machinations of what happens in episodes 2, 3, and 4 are tremendously important. So you're not just biding your time from setup to payoff or from setup to cliffhanger. Each of those things is another rung upon the ladder. It's always rewarding to see it fully come into focus. And sometimes you realize that in the writer's room discussion. Sometimes it's in the outline stage. Sometimes it's, when you read a script, and, occasionally we realize it in post, and we can make an adjustment. But, getting to that place where, it's tight, the pacing is going to work. We are not veering off in a tangent, gratuitously at any point. It's a ballet, but so far, we haven't fallen.
Well, look, you have really hit the ground running for part 1 of your 3-part finale for season 6, and you've all been so generous with your time today. I hope we get to talk again as the season continues. But Josh, Jon, and Hayden, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. This was great.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-creators and showrunners Josh Heald, Jon Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg for being so generous with their time and coming down to talk about Cobra Kai season 6, episodes 1 through 5, which is the first part of a 3-part finale on Netflix. And folks, while you're surfing around online, I hope you'll also check out Backstory Magazine. We just turned 12 this summer, and not only did we release a new issue, and we always add articles to it, this week I just put our Deadpool and Wolverine writer's piece on our blog for free for the world to read. You do not have to be a subscriber. I did this not only to celebrate our birthday, but also to show readers around the world the kind of love and care we give to every article, to really go behind the scenes and find out how things work in each of these films and TV shows that we cover. We examined what it took to make that film the #1 box office smash in the world, and also the most successful rated R film of all time. So this is a spoiler-specific interview where we were really able to get into the details of the storytelling in the script, and I know you'll dig it. So don't forget to have a look at Backstory's blog at backstory.net. And look, if you want to become a subscriber to sweeten the deal, I'm happy to offer you discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. It could be entered into the shopping cart at backstory.net, and it will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine page's Zoomcast, which is where you could see all these Zoom interviews and actually see me talk to the writers. It would really mean a lot to me to have you consider supporting independent journalism and becoming a subscriber. So thanks for considering. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2024. All rights reserved. Folks, if you want to drop me a line, feel free to reach out to me on social media. You could find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Backstory_mag on Twitter, also known as X. You could use those same handles over on Instagram, Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. I also have a Facebook fan page that we could chat on, and you could always email backstoryletters@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.